Welcome to another episode of Prodigy Search Presents. It's a great honor to have with us today Chris Hibbs, President of Legends Global Partnerships, a role that was recently created, I think late February, although Chris, I know you've been doing a lot of that work prior.
Sure.
20 years in the business or so, a longtime friend, great respect for Chris, one of the kindest and nicest gentlemen you'll find, not only in the world of sport, but in life as a whole. And if I'm not mistaken, Chris, I think you live in Manhattan Beach, which makes me extremely jealous because it's one of the nicer places. I lived.
Yeah.
When I grew up in LA, as you know, and lived in El Segundo before I moved east and spent a lot of time in Manhattan Beach. So I'm jealous. So you're sitting in a beautiful area.
Yeah, so I'll give my my true local town props. Hermosa Beach, technically, we're right next door to Manhattan Beach, as you know, Scotty. But for two little kind of village communities by the beach, there's a little bit of competition between Hermosa, the gritty kind of little surf community that wants to stay that way, and Manhattan Beach, which is a little bit different. But I'll tell you what, man, I say it every single day. I think given this really tough situation our entire society is in, this is a pretty good place to be. You know, I'm looking outside where the sun is shining, it's warm. There's fresh air, the ocean breeze. Like if you feel like you need to be outside and be healthy while being socially distant, you can do it here. You know, we've all got lots of friends in big, dense places like Manhattan, lots of colleagues. I think that would have been a really tough place to be the last few months for sure.
It doesn't stink, and I'm jealous, but good for you. And I know you're staying out of harm's way and staying safe. So, Chris, I appreciate you taking time. Spend about 30 minutes. I want to talk about a number of different things. Clearly, some current challenges that you and, of course, the world are taking on, but your big role. Let's talk a little bit about your role with Legends before we get into some current, scenarios relative to what you're dealing with in Los Angeles. But tell us a little bit about your change in day responsibilities with the role of Legends. I know currently, I'm sure what's going on in the world has perhaps paused that a bit, but love to know just a little bit about your added responsibilities, your change in responsibilities relative to your Legends role.
By the way, Scotty, great looking background you got there.
Well, thank you. And
it's ESPN worthy.
What's that?
It's ESPN worthy, man. You look great.
Well, I did a little staging, I can say a little bit, but no, I'm fortunate to have a nice, comfortable place to do this. And back at you, you got some nice memorabilia behind you.
Yeah, same, a little bit of staging, but not really. I think, one thing that I was really lucky to have, and a bit about our culture at Legends is, and it's not for every single employee. We have a big, diverse company, but a lot of us had some freedom to kind of work where you had to be, right? And I credit, Shervin Merhashmi, our CEO, to providing kind of that culture and freedom. So I had a pretty good space here at home, even before coronavirus was on our doorstep. So it's actually been good. I've got my 11-year-old around the corner on a Zoom call, I'm sure, doing classwork, and my wife somewhere with the pets. But super lucky to have a good work environment. That's important. I think, who would have thought just 3 months ago, right? We were talking about kind of the announcement we made and Legends Global Partnerships becoming its own division, of which I'm very proud to lead. But back then, who would have thought we'd be thinking about, Microsoft Teams and Zoom calls and spending so much time on video conference and worrying about the kind of work environment you have at home. And that's become, the forefront of our minds, every single day for 3 months now.
It's interesting too, because you hear so much talk about it, right? And where will that lead to, future companies in the future having a lot of employees working home? I'm a little old school, and I've had that question prior to this. Hey, how do you feel about remote employees? And I'm kind of an older school guy that says, I like to work in the hallway and you can gather and chat. But I think this has been a forced way to, test.
I do too. So I'm like you, there's nothing that really replaces kind of being in person and sitting across the table from somebody. But, video conference technology is probably better than I thought. And people have adapted more quickly than I probably appreciated. I do think there will be things. Our company is one that would get on a plane and go see a client or a brand or a partner at the drop of a hat. We just valued that. I think that changes a little bit. I don't think fundamentally, I don't think a company like ours goes 180. But I think, maybe there's a silver lining of this, and there's some things that come out of the last, few months and the next few months that maybe change some habits in a positive way. I mean, I'm a glass half full guy, so I always try to think about, all right, what can be positive from this? You know, kind of back to your question, you know, my role within Legends, kind of shifting from what I've overseen here in Los Angeles for Stan Kroenke and the SoFi Stadium project to really leading this division of our company. It's really about focus. You know, the partnerships business or the sponsorship business, you know, obviously a critical revenue stream for virtually every property out there. And I would say a revenue stream that's probably growing in importance as player costs are greater every single year, inevitably, as venue and stadium costs, you know, continue to go up. Certainly we see that here in Los Angeles with what Stan's building. You know, revenues need to increase, obviously, with more velocity, and sponsorship, advertising, all that goes with that is just more and more important. And I think our company felt like, although we've been good at that and we've done that for a long time, do we have the focus we needed? Do we have the people that were really focused on it every single day? It had been kind of rolled into a larger kind of segment of our business. So that's really the change we made was, hey, if we're going to be really, really great for the long haul, you know, let's have dedicated people, let's staff up in certain areas, and let's have some focus. So it's been a ton of fun. It's been a unique time to take on a new role, obviously. Yeah. But, you know, back to our earlier discussion, you know, there are really smart brands out there that are thinking about, hey, how do you take advantage of this tough time and how do you come out stronger from a brand perspective? And there are properties out there that are all challenged for sure, but there are properties that are thinking about 2021. And part of my job, and I think our responsibility is, especially now for a property, whether it be a team or a venue or a league that is worried about now and triaging the today, how do we help them think about the future and think about a different time and make sure that they've got some success kind of locked in while they're worrying about this challenge today?
You know, Chris, you say that too. You've heard so much about, you know, I mean, there's almost an over proliferation of all the talk about, you know, sport is the healer, right? And everybody wants to come back and who's going to be first, but do it right and so forth. But the scary part, at least perhaps for all of our perspectives, is 2020 written off? Now, it's hard for me to even ask you that because you got a gorgeous $5 billion facility opening up here in 3 months. So you're clearly not writing off 2020, but you know, you talk about brands and budgets and what's happening and what's going on and where the revenues are and what they do in terms of the shift and how are they budgeting. That's got to be a challenge among the million things you're working with.
Yeah, it is a big time challenge. There's no two ways about it. Now, again, kind of going back to, you know, glass half full, you have to start somewhere. So we're sitting here talking in May, and there's positive things that are happening. Again, you wouldn't call them positive 3 months ago, but positive things happening just this week. So, you know, excited about taking steps. You got to get players back in facilities. You got to get teams kind of restarted. Someone's got to take a first step and like start competition. So you see NASCAR doing that. You see UFC doing that. I think, you know, professional golf leagues and tours are doing that. So you have to start somewhere. I think all the leagues are really committed to restarting some kind of competition in 2020. But there's no doubt it's going to be really different. I think, again, you know, what's a silver lining? So, you know, how do properties and leagues go to market with even better digital and social media coverage? How do sponsors and brands rededicate, you know, some of their advertising and sponsorship spend to those areas that were a focus before, but are a greater focus now? Obviously, you know, we're all excited about, you know, watching NFL games on TV, you know, knocking on wood later on this fall. The ratings are going to be even better than they already are. So, you know, there'll be some silver linings. And I do feel like 2020 we'll get things restarted or started in the case of things like Major League Soccer and baseball. But there's no question, you know, my company is also thinking about 2021. And it's not just sports. I mean, you know, we kind of get in this, you know, sometimes this narrow focus of sporting events, but, you know, live music is a gigantic business unto itself. It's a big part of what we're involved in. So you see a few things right now with live music venues and artists trying to think about how do they restart. So, you know, we're as ambitious about when does that start to happen? Can that happen later on in 2020 again?
And that's interesting too, right? I'm sorry to interrupt you, Chris, but you talk about music. Yeah. Sport, you know, look, it's driven by the fans, it's driven by the home team, it's driven by the aura, you know, but you launch and you say we'll have empty stadiums perhaps, or dramatically reduced fans in the stadiums, but music, you can't put on a concert and put it on TV. I mean, you could, right. But I mean, it's such a different, you know, dichotomy, if you will, in terms of how those two exist.
Yeah, it really is. It is more of a, you know, you don't necessarily follow a musician from stop to stop. Some people probably do, but it's very different than you would, you know, your favorite team. It is a very live event that's kind of, you go into a venue in your town maybe. So it is different, but it's a massive business unto itself. And, you know, Legends, were really involved. We got great partners at folks like Live Nation, and we serve food and beverage and culinary in lots of venues. So we think about that every single day, just like we do about sports. So, I mean, your question, Scotty, 2020 is obviously been a challenge already. It's going to be a really different, you know, next couple quarters. As we get into 21, you know, listen, I foresee a new normal where fans are in venues in a different way. You know, listen, fans are going to expect ingress and egress to be different. They're going to expect to be served food and beverage to be done differently. So we're preparing for a lot of those things and trying to help folks answer questions on how does that go. And I think from a sponsorship standpoint, there'll be a bump in the road. There's no doubt about it.
Challenge. Talk a little bit about, you know, given the current times, Chris, and you're in obviously Southern California. Governor Newsom has been I thought he's been a terrific leader from what I've seen from here. And Mayor Garcetti in Los Angeles, and they've talked about live events and so forth. Tell me about, I mean, your construction is near end. I know there's been a couple of things I've read that there's been a couple of construction workers that have tested positive, but as it, you know, in terms of your timeline and your opening, have things been affected? Are you ready to more or less get your certificate of occupancy and open up here shortly?
Yeah. So I'm certainly not the construction person, but I think we've been very lucky when Governor Newsom came out with, you know, kind of the first set of restrictions. And I totally agree, by the way. I think the leadership in California, they've been conservative, which is probably the right way to go. Right. They've been really strong, regardless of what your political affiliation is. They've been good leaders. They've communicated really, really well. They've been in sync from a mayoral to governor relationship. But they've also, being conservative, they said, listen, opening, you know, live venues is late in the game, and we understand that. From a construction standpoint, there was a series of exemptions around the safer at home, you know, rules that the governor put in place in California. So construction's continued, and we've obviously been, you know, real clear about that. So I think we've been lucky in that regard. The construction continues on SoFi Stadium and Hollywood Park. It's on time for summer delivery, which was always kind of the goal, has been the goal. We've got a terrific construction joint venture at Turner AECOM. They've been working away. Obviously, all the great folks we've got out there working in the field want to be there, and they want to, you know, do their job and get paid. So that part is on track. I haven't been to the site, obviously, in many weeks, which is weird because I'm typically there on a frequent basis. Yeah. We are thinking about how do we get staff back, you know, not just to the site, but to our various offices. So I think everybody's in that mode of, all right, much like, you know, how fans would expect to come back into a venue down the road, how does staff expect to come back in their offices? Whether you're at a sales center like we have in LA or at the construction site, you know, what are the measures you'd expect to be in place? How comfortable are you sitting close to a colleague or not? So we're working through all those things right now. But the video and the imagery that I've seen of the stadium is unbelievable. There's some stuff you can follow SoFi Stadium on Instagram and Twitter, and it's spectacular. So it's not how we imagine kind of revealing some things right now, quite frankly. Yeah. But when people get in the building, which obviously will happen hopefully sooner than later, it's going to blow people's minds.
So I can't wait. And this as an aside, Chris, you and I have talked about in the past, but I grew up literally down the street from the Forum and in Westchester near the airport, and went, you know, worked at the Forum for 20 years and know that area and Prairie so well. And to fly over there, and I haven't done it in a while, to see that come out of the ground is just spectacular. So I can't wait to see it when the whole world settles and see the whole district and what you guys have built there is going to be phenomenal.
It's you know, I give so much credit to Mr. Kroenke again to be doing what he's been doing, and then to be faced with this kind of when you're at the 5-yard line. You know, I can't imagine, you know, what he's thinking every single day. But the vision to not just build a great venue and bring football back to LA, which obviously is what most people think about, but to build something that, you know, architecturally and from a tourist perspective is a legacy for decades and decades, that then brings things like, you know, college football national championships, Super Bowls. I mean, the Olympics, there's nothing bigger than what's going to happen in 2028 here in Los Angeles. So, you know, all those things have lots of folks to credit, but none of them really happen unless you have this spectacular venue in this spectacular market that everybody wants to be in. So we'll get past this this roadblock and this speed bump, and great times ahead in this market.
What about programming, Chris? And not to get specific, I know the original event was going to be Taylor Swift, and her tour has been postponed to 21. Football presumably coming, you know, on time and in the fall. But from a programming standpoint, you know, things have shifted and are probably shifting week to week, I suspect. Sure. What's the general thought now in terms of opening or programming around them?
Yeah, I mean, it's a day-to-day thing. We've got a great programming team that's working with, you know, both the leagues on what's the NFL saying, and then obviously what are all the promoters and our artist friends saying. So Taylor postponed. I guess our broad statement, Scotty, is we expect everything to play at SoFi Stadium. And I think that's probably the case for most, you know, most acts and venues. Is it's much more about postponement. There are certainly some cancellations out there, but we expect some things to be pushed back. And candidly, you know, in the end, that's probably what's going to be best. We want the building to be full with everybody that anticipated coming and wanted to come and being in the environment they want to be in, as opposed to trying to wedge something in and maybe, you know, not have it be the environment or what people thought. So the only thing that's formally postponed is Taylor Swift and Friends, which was going to be spectacular. You know, she evolved her stage setup because the demand was so high, 2 nights with all of her special guests. So we'll do that in 21 at some point in time. I think they're going to announce that date, you know, hopefully soon. There was a handful of other shows that are still booked that are being worked through right now. So what's going to be the first act or the first event in SoFi Stadium, I would say, is TBD. Certainly football will be right there. And then, you know, when do we evolve from hosting events without fans to obviously, you know, with fans, and what does that gradual step look like is something that every venue operator is thinking about right now. Is, you know, do you have a stair step of how many people can you get in? And, you know, there's 2 sides to it. There's, you know, what's right from a cleanliness and a approach standpoint. Then there's what makes people safe and comfortable. You know, there's folks who are, you know, have bought tickets for events and season tickets for games and are passionate about those things, yet might say, listen, I need some more time before I'm comfortable. And I think that whole question of how big is that group is something that isn't clear right now for our entire industry, and probably won't be clear until we get a little bit closer.
And probably NFL more than anybody. I guess college football clearly is addressing that too. But in terms of larger gatherings, I mean, that's going to be the first, I would assume, the first rollout of a large number of people. So I'm sure that's your daily evolvement. Shifting gears a little bit, Chris, and because I know you're dealing with the pandemic and probably tired of being asked questions about it. Talk a little bit about SoFi. I mean, unbelievable naming rights partner, I'm sure. You know, set, I'm sure, milestones in terms of record revenue. But tell a little bit of how that came about. I mean, not a traditional brand that's been out there, clearly aware of them. And but talk, you know, briefly in terms of how you uncovered and how you brought them on board.
Sure. So, did you know the name SoFi, Scotty, 2+ years ago?
I can say I did because my son was getting occasional mailing pieces on student debt.
There you go.
So frankly, that's probably the only introduction I had to the brand.
Yeah, which that goes for a lot of people. I think I would say it almost always starts with, well, I knew someone who was maybe of a different or a younger demographic, and a lot of it was back to student debt, which is kind of like their story and how they were founded. So I guess I would say it's a really cool story. It's a really cool company, and there's a lot of people to credit, you know, within our project and within Legends Global Partnerships who really brought that about. Some of it is just good old fashioned kind of doing the work and doing the research and prospecting and thinking about, you know, what are new trends and what's a traditional industry like financial services that it has a kind of a subcategory that's thinking differently. So there was just a lot of research and prospecting, and yeah, there was a moment, I couldn't tell you the date right now. There was a moment probably in 2017 where it's like, hey, who's this company? Right. And, you know, let's try and get a meeting. So someone on my team here in LA did a great job of that and really did put that legwork and that research in, and made sure that first outreach was a real positive, you know, thoughtful one. It certainly helped that the new CEO then of SoFi is Anthony Noto. Right. So former CFO of the NFL, a really good guy that, either we all knew indirectly or in some cases knew directly. So, you know, he kind of got it right away. You know, he understood the importance of this market. He understood what a brand new venue, you know, could mean as a marketing tool. So you don't always have that from a senior decision maker. Sometimes there's more of an education that has to go into that. So we were lucky there. But it was really, yeah, it was kind of good old fashioned prospecting, research, salesmanship. They have some people there that are still there that were really internal champions kind of on Anthony's team that really got it. And then, you know, listen, timing is always important, right? So the timing of their company, obviously, you know, it had been founded years prior, but was really evolving under Anthony's leadership into much more of a financial services firm that does a lot more than refinance student debt and student loans. And their major issue was, hey, you know, we're going to have great digital tools and we've got a great vision, but nobody knows us yet, right? And the folks that do know us, they know us kind of in this box, and we've got to broaden that significantly. So the timing of their desires to become known quickly, especially starting kind of in their region, they're based in San Francisco, and the timing of our project really synced up. So, you know, those are always big, complicated ones that take a lot of time to work through, and it did for sure when you're asking
for
how
many years is it? 20 years?
20 year,
yeah. Okay.
Which, you know, just that alone, you think about, especially during the time we're in now, right. You know, the kinds of businesses and industries that are willing to make a long-term commitment. That's a hard one for many, many folks, but they saw the vision. They're obviously going to be here. Great relationship with Stan Kroenke and that leadership. So we were really proud of that one. A lot of work went into that. The name, I think, rolls right off the tongue, right? It's easy. SoFi Stadium. Their colors are terrific. They match the kind of the color scheme of the project. Both teams have blue as a prominent color. So, you know, rarely do all the pieces fit as well as they have here.
Now, will you carve out, I mean, will they be fully integrated through the district, Chris? Or, I mean, I'm sure you carved out certain areas that perhaps you'll be able to resell with different brands, but will SoFi take a full integration?
Yeah, so it's really been one of the cool things about Stan's project, not just the venues and the stadium and all the technology, but as you know, it's really a city, right? It's so much more than just the venue. So having the ability to kind of answer that question, you know, years ago and think about, well, what else is going to be there and how do you best monetize those pieces? I mean, you know, Stan is a real estate kind of visionary at his core. You think of him as a sports person, which he certainly is, but real estate is kind of where it starts. So how do you get the most value and use the land you have in the best way is always kind of like his core tenet. So the answer to your question is SoFi, you know, as our exclusive partner and naming rights, they will be integrated throughout. In fact, they may have some brick and mortar aspects at some point in time down the road. And the district is on certainly a later timeline to open up. There are things being built right now, but the stadium and the performance venue are always first, with the district to follow later on. So there's a full integration there, but there's also other areas that are really to be envisioned and to be monetized down the road. that's part of what makes it really cool when you've got all these different pieces that you can bring online at different times.
Good for you. And again, I don't want to get too descriptive, but having two teams, that have different personalities. Clearly, we know that, and I know a little bit just in the industry. Not that's just not a negative. Just I think
sure.
Idiosyncrasies. How has it been to handle or juggle the different personalities between the Rams and Chargers, and the need on the premium side and the sponsorship, coordination, etc. Talk a little bit about some of those nuances.
It's been a terrific learning experience. I mean, you think about, nobody's ever really had the responsibility or a group of people to kind of thread the needle like we have the last 4 years. I mean, we certainly spent time talking to our colleagues that were in New York, during MetLife Stadium's development and work with the two teams. But it was a different setup. It was a pretty different setup in this one. I mean, listen, they are two different teams. Like every team is different. Every team has its own company, and in many ways, most of them are family-run operations. The people at both are terrific, which is the best place to start. So really good people who have the best intentions. The way it happened with the Rams coming first, and then the Chargers basically coming a year later, like that was really interesting, right? Because you kind of started down one track.
Right.
You knew that was a possibility, but it could have been Raiders or Chargers. And all of a sudden it happened probably unexpectedly. I would say most people, if you go way back to January of 2017, didn't think a second team was going to come to LA.
Pretty quick, right? That decision seemed to come pretty quick.
It happened quickly. Yeah. I think people thought that Raiders would probably go to Vegas as they did, and the Chargers would get something figured out with the political, group down in San Diego. So that just happened quickly and fundamentally changed a lot of things for me and my team. We became very much, communicators, folks that sat in between all the entities. So it's been a great learning experience. We joke about, the book we're all going to write someday. A lot of the book will have to do with like that dynamic. You've got two teams in town. They're competitors, like every entertainment venue in a big market like Los Angeles is a competitor. They do have a different kind of DNA. But, a lot of that stuff has all been kind of worked through over time. And listen, we're really lucky to have, from a sponsorship perspective, not just SoFi, but we've got a roster of, and we've probably only announced half of them. Obviously, coronavirus hasn't helped kind of the PR plan and strategy to announce the next group, but we'll do that at the right time here later on the summer. But we've got a great roster of founding partners that are heavily invested in the project and heavily invested in both teams. All those partners are the exclusive partners of the two teams. So the teams have been great to work with, and super appreciative of the work that we've done. And we've brought these great partners, not just to the construction project, the physical place, but to the two teams as well.
Oh, good for you. That's not an easy task.
Yeah.
Chris, shifting gears a little bit, because you've been great at talking about the current projects and what you're doing, but your career path has been fun. I think you and I first perhaps met each other back even in your early days with the Pistons, I think, is where maybe you may have started out of school or soon out of school, and a few years in Detroit and then a few years in Florida. Walk us, just for those that aren't terribly familiar with you, just kind of your quick stops and how you progress so rapidly and so intelligently.
Well, listen, it really is all about the people that you're around, right? So started out in Detroit, Pistons jersey back here, right out of college, young guy, low man on totem pole, selling tickets like many of us in our first jobs, right, in our industry. Not everybody, but that's a starting point. All about the people I was around. So Chad Esses was the guy that I worked for in my first job. He was the head of ticketing for the Detroit Pistons in, I guess, 99, 2000, which was an NBA lockout then. So in hindsight, what a tough time to kind of start. But back then you didn't know that. Back then you just kind of, you worked on the WNBA team and you worked on the minor league hockey team that the Pistons ownership owned. Got really lucky that, put in a good effort in my first year out of college, selling tickets and just working hard. Back then it was really a lot of phone work, as you know. Things have evolved tremendously, but data analytics and lead generation was different back then. But again, back to timing, Mr. Davidson, who's obviously passed since, but owned the Pistons, was also a visionary kind of real estate guy like Mr. Kroenke. He had tried to buy the Tampa Bay Lightning for a couple of years. That happened during my first year in Detroit. So me and actually a good friend, colleague of mine today, Mike Andreyko, we're both selling tickets for the Pistons. We raised our hands quickly and said, hey, no offense to Detroit, but we would love to see palm trees and go to Tampa.
Winters in Tampa a little bit better than winters in Detroit.
Yes, sir. And we didn't know a ton about hockey, quite frankly, and we didn't know much about Tampa, but we knew the weather was great. And so Chad and the leadership of the Pistons sent really the two of us down to Tampa within the ticketing realm, and obviously others in different areas of the business. And we spent, I spent 4+ years. Obviously early career, had way more responsibility than I was probably due. But it was very much a turnaround and got a chance to learn different parts of the business and learn how to lead and manage. And that franchise went from really being kind of in a tough time to being a model franchise. They still are today under different ownership. So spent a great time in Tampa with the Lightning. A Stanley Cup was won kind of right as I departed. And I went with the guy that I worked for in sponsorship. So I'd made the move from ticketing to premium to sponsorship, a guy named Michael Yormark. He had led that part of the business for the Lightning. He left to become the COO and ultimately the president of the Florida Panthers. So a few of us in Tampa went with Michael across the state to another challenging kind of hockey in Florida environment.
Yeah.
Still a challenged one today. Again, different ownership now. Spent 3 years and really, again, got a chance to step up and Michael did a great job kind of leading us and gave us a ton more responsibility and, had a chance to become more of an executive leader and learn other areas. So really 4+ years in Tampa, 3 years in South Florida, met my wonderful wife, Krista, in Tampa. We moved to South Florida together. So really fun, important part of my life growing as a young professional. A big turning point, though, in a positive way, was when the Chicago Bears called. So I'm a Chicagoan, grew up there. That is still my what I refer to as my hometown. And again, back to timing. They were looking for a different style leadership, probably more up and coming and new ideas in sales and marketing. And to go back home and work for your hometown team was a thrill. So 10 years and candidly, when Sherman Marhashimi called about this Legends job and working with Stan and the folks in LA, it's probably the only thing I would have left Chicago for. I had a really great job, and the McCaskey family in Chicago are just terrific owners that take care of their people. Ted Phillips is the CEO there, still is, who I'll always think of as a mentor during my 10 years. So had a great experience where you can take a historic franchise like the Bears that's willing to get more sophisticated and evolve, which they probably weren't.
I'm sorry, you're being humble, which is your personality, but you did a phenomenal job in Chicago with the Bears and what is a, traditionally conservative, or at least known to be a little bit of a conservative organization. You did a great job.
Yeah. And I'll tell you what, I'm super proud as I watched them closely. A lot of my team are still there and actually got a chance to step up, and they've gotten even more progressive. So put aside on-field performance, which all of us Chicagoans would like better of, their business is running well. But yeah, I would not have left Chicago for much other than this, Scotty. Going to Los Angeles, quality of life is great. Sun shines every day. NFL football's back in LA. So, I mean, super lucky. Can't imagine more important stops where everyone very much related to the next one. When I look back on that career, there really isn't a sidestep. There isn't something I would do over. There was people at each stop that were integral to kind of what the next move was. So very thankful.
And you've earned it, Chris. And again, I'm not trying to be overly gratuitous because you and I are chatting here right now. But again, you're one of the most humble, nicest guys in the business, and you've earned all that. So that leads to the last question as you look at the time here.
Yeah.
20 years plus in the business, done a phenomenal job over the last 4 years as that beautiful facility gets ready to open. Tough to perhaps ask, but what's your greatest accomplishment? If you look back on your career, what you've done as you just outlined it, is there a moment, an event, a project that you've done that you can say, here's what I'm most proud of, here's my greatest accomplishment?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. you could certainly look at like transactional business, and you could say a naming rights deal in Los Angeles is something that, you know, was, hey, you better get this done, and we're lucky to get that done. So there's things on paper that you could point to, I guess. You know, listen, again, you know, because people were so important to me and people that led me through all these steps, I think I really focus on making sure I've got that next group of people and young leaders that are up and coming. Maybe now more than ever. I mean, one thing we've all done the last 3 months, I think, is spend a lot more time with people. I tried to do that beforehand.
Right. I
do it even more so now. And I don't do it when I'm multitasking on the phone. I do it when I'm on video conference looking at someone, you know, as directly as I can. So I guess the answer to your question is probably really good people. When I think about the stops I've had, the people that have worked with me or maybe worked underneath me are all off on a really successful path. When I think about the leadership team that we have in Los Angeles for Legends, and we've spent a lot of time the last year talking about, well, how do we take this great experience in Los Angeles, and how do all you guys take that as your jumping off point to your next big step? I can already see that happening for all of them, all the really great leaders. So, you know, I think it's probably taking a step back and saying, you know what, I've got all these people that I've worked with over the course of, you know, 15 or 20 years, and they're all in really great positions with their trajectory pointed up. That's more important to me than deals, for sure.
Good for you. Well, Chris, I really, really appreciate your time. These are tough times. You're sitting at home. We're all sitting at home waiting for the world to ideally settle back down. You've got an amazing project there that I know everybody can't wait to get back on ground and get going. But I wish you huge success. First and foremost, safety, health, staying out of harm's way. But again, appreciate the time, appreciate your friendship. Wish you huge success, and hope you and your family stay very safe in these times.
Thanks, Scotty. My pleasure to do it, and stay safe, stay positive, man.
All right. Thank you, buddy.
Cheers.